on a beautiful day in the summer of 2022, the kind of season when the air feels heavy with promise and the roads seem to call your name. Alex and Ryan, best friends since their awkward teenage years, had been talking for weeks about this trip. Alex was the meticulous one, maps and checklists always in hand. Ryan? He preferred to improvise, to see where the wind would take them. Together, they balanced each other perfectly, one steady, one spontaneous, and that made every adventure feel right. They packed the car with tents, snacks, and a GoPro, just two friends chasing a little freedom before life grew too serious. The drive was filled with music, laughter, and inside jokes that only longtime friends could share. By late afternoon, they reached a quiet riverside spot surrounded by pine and mist. As they set up camp, Alex filmed Ryan dancing like an idiot in the fading light. It was a night that seemed so ordinary until it wasn't. By the following afternoon, the laughter that had filled their messages went silent. Alex's sister was the first to notice a text left unread, then a call that went straight to voicemail. Ryan's mother tried to brush it off, telling herself the boys were probably still out of signal range, enjoying their camping trip. But as the hours turned into a full day without a single update, a sense of unease began to spread. Both families knew their sons well. Alex was responsible to a fault. He always checked in. Ryan, even at his most carefree, never ignored his mom's calls. By the third day, the silence had grown deafening. When the police were finally notified, they treated it as a routine missing persons report, two young men off camping, perhaps lost or delayed. A local search team was dispatched to the area Alex had mentioned in a group chat. A remote stretch of woodland by the river, a place popular among hikers but far enough off-grid to feel isolated. It didn't take long for officers to locate their vehicle, parked neatly at the edge of the dirt track. The car doors were locked, and inside were their spare clothes, snacks, and Ryan's phone charger still coiled beside the seat. There was no sign of struggle, no obvious clue to suggest foul play, just stillness. Following the faint path down towards the water, the searchers found the campsite. The tent was still standing, its flaps half open and gently swaying in the breeze. A campfire ring sat in front of it, ashes cold and untouched for days. Two sleeping bags were spread neatly inside, one zipped halfway. Nearby, a half-empty bottle of water, a packet of crisps, and a lighter rested on a log as if someone had stepped away for just a moment. Nothing was missing, except for one peculiar detail. Alex's camera gear, including the GoPro he'd been filming with since the start of the trip, was nowhere to be found. That small absence changed everything. At first, investigators assumed the pair had simply gone hiking and lost their way. The surrounding area was dense and easy to get turned around in. But when the search dogs were brought in, their behavior puzzled everyone. They picked up a scent trail leading down to the riverbank, then abruptly stopped. The dogs circled, confused, unable to find a continuing path. Divers were brought in to comb the slow-moving current, yet no trace of either young man was found. Not a piece of clothing, not a footprint beyond the water's edge. It was as though the forest had swallowed them whole. By the end of the week, the story had reached local news outlets. 2 campers missing in the highlands, the headlines read, accompanied by smiling photos of Alex and Ryan in hiking gear. Volunteers joined the search, drones were deployed, and the area expanded mile by mile. But every day ended the same way, nothing. No sound, no sign, no evidence to explain what had happened. And yet, something about the campsite felt deeply wrong. One of the officers later described it as too tidy. There were no signs of panic or haste, no scattered belongings, no overturned chairs. It looked staged, as if whoever had last been there wanted it to appear untouched. Stranger still, the GoPro case was found inside the tent, empty, sitting neatly beside Alex's backpack. There were no fingerprints other than his. Speculation began to grow. Some believed they'd faked their disappearance, maybe to film some viral stunt. Others whispered about accidents, quicksand by the river, wild animals, even a hidden sinkhole. But locals who knew the area well dismissed those theories. The river wasn't deep enough to drown two men without leaving a trace. There were no cliffs nearby, no caves, nothing that could swallow them so completely. As the days stretched into weeks, the search shifted from rescue to recovery. Posters with their faces faded under rain and sun. Reporters moved on. The families, however, couldn't. Alex's father returned to the site almost daily, walking the same trails over and over, calling his son's name into the stillness. Ryan's mom left small offerings by the river flowers. A note, once even his old football scarf, anything to feel closer to him. Then, nearly 3 weeks after they'd vanished, a fisherman reported finding something tangled in the reeds a few miles downstream. It was a broken strap, the kind used for mounting a camera. Police divers combed the river again but found nothing else. The GoPro itself was still missing. That discovery reignited every question. If they had drowned, where were the bodies? If they had left voluntarily, why abandon the car and all their belongings? And most unsettling of all, if someone else had been there, why take only the camera? The investigation quietly wound down without answers. Files were shelved, interviews dwindled, and the forest returned to silence. Yet, for the families, the emptiness never faded. Every sound of running water, every gust through the trees, carried an echo of that unspoken question. What really happened by that river? The GoPro, the one thing that could have captured the truth, remained missing. It was almost a full year later when the story stirred again, long after most people had stopped asking questions. Early that spring, two friends kayaking along the same river where Alex and Ryan had disappeared noticed something half buried in the mud near the bank. At first, they thought it was just litter, another bit of plastic washed up by the current. But as one of them leaned closer, he realized it was a small black camera, caked in silt and tangled with reeds. A GoPro. They took it to the nearest police station, and within hours, the discovery reached the families. The serial number matched Alex's missing camera. For the first time in months, there was something tangible, a sliver of evidence that might explain what had happened. The device was sent to a forensic lab, where technicians carefully cleaned and dried it, trying to salvage whatever was left on the memory card. Despite the damage, the data was intact. When the footage was finally ready to view, a handful of officers gathered in a small room at the sheriff's office. The blinds were drawn, the lights dimmed, and the only sound was the soft hum of the computer. As the video loaded, no one spoke. It felt as though even breathing too loudly might disturb what was about to be seen. The first clips were exactly what you'd expect from two friends on a summer camping trip. The screen flickered with sunlight and laughter, Ryan pretending to be a nature presenter, Alex teasing him from behind the camera. There were shots of the drive up the mountain roads, a brief stop at a petrol station, then the pair setting up their tent by the river. You could almost hear the warmth of the day in their voices. They cooked instant noodles over a campfire, joked about who would get eaten first if a bear showed up, and filmed each other skipping stones across the water. It was all so ordinary, so human, that for a few moments the officers almost forgot they were watching two people who would soon vanish. But around the halfway mark, the footage began to change. The camera, now propped up on a tripod inside the tent, recorded the two men settling down for the night. The fire outside had burned low, casting faint orange shadows through the fabric. There was a soft rustle of sleeping bags, the muffled laughter of tired friends, and then silence, a long stretch of it. Minutes passed with nothing but the quiet hum of crickets and the steady sound of breathing. Then came a noise. Faint at first, like a twig snapping somewhere outside. Ryan stirred and whispered something inaudible. Alex, half awake, muttered back. The noise came again, closer this time, a dull, rhythmic crunch, like footsteps on dry leaves. The camera caught the movement of Alex sitting up, the small circle of torchlight sweeping across the inside of the tent. Probably a deer. Ryan said, his voice low and uncertain. But there was something in his tone, a note of unease that hadn't been there before. The sounds outside grew louder, circling the tent, not fast, not frantic, just steady, deliberate. Then, a whisper. Not the wind, not an animal. A human whisper, so faint that the officers had to rewind the clip several times to make sure. It was impossible to make out the words, but it sent a chill through the room all the same. Alex could be heard whispering, "Who's there?" followed by the quiet zip of the tent door being pulled open. The camera stayed inside, fixed on the empty space, catching only the dim glow of the torchlight beyond. A few seconds later, the torch went out. What followed was chaos, the sound of hurried footsteps, muffled shouts, and the camera tipping sideways. For a moment, the lens caught something outside, a shadow crossing in front of the fire, tall and unmistakably human. Then a flash, a hand pressing against the fabric of the tent from the outside, leaving a dark, wet smear. The footage shook violently, the audio crackling with panic, before everything went black. When the image returned, the camera seemed to have been dropped on the ground, facing upwards. The lens was smeared with dirt, but you could still see fragments, branches moving, a boot stepping briefly into view. The boots were distinctive, heavy, old-fashioned, with thick soles and metal eyelets. Not the kind of footwear either Alex or Ryan owned. There were no voices now, only the faint rustle of movement and the whisper of wind through the trees. Then, suddenly, stillness again. The final minute of the footage was almost unbearable. The camera lay tilted, half submerged in mud, capturing only the base of the tent and the faint reflection of firelight flickering across the river. Somewhere in the background, a single drawn-out breath could be heard. Not gasping, not struggling, just breathing, calm, controlled. And then the video ended. When the screen went dark, no one in the room moved. One of the officers finally reached forward to pause the playback, though it had already stopped. No one spoke for several seconds. The sound of the rain outside the sheriff's office felt louder than usual, as if the world itself needed to fill the silence the footage had left behind. The GoPro had answered nothing. If anything, it had made the mystery worse. There were no faces captured, no clear evidence of who or what had been out there that night. Just a sequence of moments that left everyone in the room unsettled long after they'd gone home. In the days that followed, the footage was analyzed frame by frame, enhanced, stabilized, filtered for sound. But all it revealed were more questions. The whisper, the handprint, the boots details that seemed real yet impossible to explain. And as the investigators replayed it again and again, one thought lingered. Whoever had taken that camera, whoever had stood outside that tent, had been close enough to touch them. Within days of the GoPro footage being confirmed as genuine, the story exploded across every corner of the internet. Clips began circulating online, blurred and shortened versions, ripped from leaked police files, and within hours, hashtags appeared, theories multiplied, and the public found itself both horrified and obsessed. News channels replayed the same few seconds again and again. The whisper, the hand pressing against the tent, the faint outline of a boot. Comment sections filled with armchair detectives insisting they'd spotted something others hadn't. A shadow between trees, a reflection in the water, a figure just outside the frame. What had once been a private tragedy now belonged to everyone. People from across the UK and far beyond took sides in what quickly became a digital battleground. Some argued the video was fake, an elaborate hoax staged for views. Others swore it was real, that Alex and Ryan had encountered something sinister, human or otherwise. Reddit threads ballooned into hundreds of pages, with self-proclaimed experts dissecting every frame. They analyzed timestamps, compared shadows, enhanced audio files. Someone even created a 3D reconstruction of the campsite, mapping where each sound might have originated. It was as though the internet had turned into one vast, obsessive investigation. Meanwhile, the official response remained cautious. The local police issued a brief statement calling the footage inconclusive, and warning against speculative interpretations. They confirmed that no bodies had been recovered, no suspects identified, and no evidence of foul play had been established, at least none that could stand in court. The sheriff handling the case, clearly weary of the media frenzy, said only that the footage documents a distressing incident, but without corroborating evidence, we can't draw definitive conclusions. It was the kind of bureaucratic phrasing that satisfied no one. Behind the scenes, though, investigators were not as dismissive as they appeared. The video had been sent to an audio forensic lab in Manchester for deeper analysis. Experts isolated background frequencies, filtering out wind, insects, and crackling fire, until they found something faint but unmistakable beneath it all, a rhythmic, low murmur. It wasn't random noise. It had cadence, almost like a chant. The sound rose and fell in patterns that didn't fit speech or breathing. When slowed down, some claimed it resembled words, though no one could agree on what language they were hearing. The discovery reignited everything. Theories veered darker. Some suggested local cult activity, drawing on stories of strange gatherings that had taken place in the area decades earlier. Others insisted it was simply audio distortion, nothing more than the forest playing tricks. But for the families, none of that mattered. When Alex's father was shown the footage in private, he reportedly broke down halfway through. He said he could tell from the sound of his son's breathing that he was terrified. Ryan's mother, in her first and only interview, said she had stopped sleeping after watching it. "They weren't afraid of anything," she said softly. "Not until that night. Whatever happened, they knew they were in danger." Her words haunted viewers even more than the footage itself. Across the region, people began visiting the river again, not to camp, but to leave flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. The campsite became a kind of ghostly pilgrimage spot. Some went out of sympathy, others out of morbid curiosity. Journalists camped nearby, hoping to capture the eerie silence for their documentaries. Locals started reporting strange disturbances. Unfamiliar boot prints in the mud, echoes that seemed to move in circles, faint whispers that carried across the water at night. Whether those claims were genuine or born of suggestion hardly mattered. The fear had taken on a life of its own. The renewed public interest prompted another official search, though few believed it would lead anywhere. This time investigators expanded the perimeter beyond the river, combing through nearby caves and old mine shafts. Drones were deployed again, along with volunteers and specialist teams. For days the sound of helicopters echoed through the valley, but the forest remained stubbornly silent. On the fourth day, a discovery was made. In a small cave less than 2 miles from the original campsite, searchers found a piece of weathered fabric tangled among rocks. It was part of a tent panel, faded, torn, and unmistakably the same model Alex had owned. Forensic tests later confirmed traces of human DNA on it, but the results were inconclusive. It didn't reveal whose blood it was, only that it had been there for a long time. That fragment reignited media frenzy once more, but police urged caution. "It's a possible connection, not a conclusion," the sheriff said during a brief press conference. Yet the symbolism was impossible to ignore. A single remnant of the night they vanished, found in the darkness underground, as if deliberately hidden. In the following weeks, the story began to fade again, but never completely. Every so often, it resurfaced in podcasts, documentaries, and online debates. Some treated it as a true crime mystery, others whispered about it like folklore. The GoPro footage, though never officially released, became one of the most analyzed digital artifacts in recent memory. Entire channels dedicated themselves to decoding it, slowing it frame by frame, trying to extract meaning from every pixel of fear. And yet, no amount of analysis could change the simple, haunting truth. 2 young men had vanished without trace, leaving behind nothing but silence and a recording that seemed to breathe with something inhuman. For their families there was no closure, only the unbearable certainty that their sons had known they were not alone that night. Even now, locals say that if you stand by the river at dusk, when the air is still and the water barely moves, you can hear faint murmurs under the surface, rhythmic, distant, almost like someone whispering a prayer that refuses to end. Months after the GoPro footage had chilled everyone who dared to watch it, the case of Ryan and Mia appeared to fade into that uneasy category of unresolved mysteries, the kind that leaves people glancing over their shoulders when the woods grow quiet. Yet, just as the story seemed to be losing its grip on the public, a new twist rekindled the obsession. It began with a local fisherman who was walking along a muddy stretch of the riverbank, a few miles downstream from where the couple's last campsite had been marked. He spotted something glinting faintly in the sunlight, a small, white object half buried in the silt. At first he thought it was rubbish, but when he picked it up, he realized it was an AirPod, scuffed and water-stained, with the initials RW scratched into the plastic. The AirPod discovery made headlines immediately. For the first time in nearly a year, investigators had a tangible link to Ryan. The serial number confirmed it was purchased under his Apple ID, and when technicians placed it under forensic scrutiny, they found faint traces of river sediment consistent with the stream that wound near the couple's last known location. The discovery reignited the investigation, sending both police and volunteers back into the area. It was proof, however small, that Ryan and Mia had indeed reached the river that night. And with that confirmation came a fragile sense of hope. Perhaps, buried somewhere out there, more answers waited to be found. But as soon as the hope began to grow, so did the theories. Online communities swarmed to reanalyze every detail of the footage, every frame, every sound. This was the renewed theories phase, a collision of speculation and paranoia. One camp believed the couple had met a tragic but natural fate, slipping on wet stones and being carried away by the river's fierce current. Others were convinced something or someone had been out there with them. The eerie chanting, the shadow glimpsed. Between trees, the sudden camera drop, all were revisited, dissected, slowed down and filtered through the lenses of internet detectives. It wasn't an accident, one Reddit user insisted. There's something else in those woods. Fuel was added to the fire when, only weeks later, a search team discovered a piece of clothing wedged between tree roots near the water's edge. A further evidence moment that deepened the sense of dread. It was a dark hoodie, torn and stiff with mud, the same brand and size Ryan was last seen wearing. Forensic testing confirmed it bore traces of his DNA. There were also several fine scratches on the fabric, not claw marks, but something thinner, sharper, as though dragged across branches or stone. It didn't prove foul play, yet it didn't rule it out either. The discovery only widened the chasm between logic and fear. While internet sleuths continued to spin theories about cults, stalkers, and ancient folklore tied to the region's caves, the local sheriff's department turned to science for answers. A team of environmental experts conducted what they called a hydrology analysis, a study of how the underground river system connected to the surrounding landscape. The findings were unsettling. Beneath the dense forest stretched a network of limestone tunnels and submerged caverns, some large enough to swallow a person whole. Water could flow into these openings during periods of heavy rain, drawing debris and possibly bodies deep underground, only to release them miles away or not at all. It provided a plausible explanation for why no trace of Ryan or Mia had ever been recovered, yet it left room for darker interpretations. For those following the case, this explanation offered neither comfort nor closure. It painted a picture of nature itself as an accomplice silent, indifferent, and capable of erasing two people without leaving a single trace. And perhaps that was what disturbed people most. The idea that something could simply take them, quietly, without reason, that the woods could keep its secrets so completely. As weeks passed, documentaries revisited the story. Former detectives appeared on podcasts, speculating with careful restraint. It's one of those cases, one said, where you can't decide if the mystery lies in human cruelty or in the vast, unpredictable landscape itself. Ryan's parents attended a vigil by the river, placing 2 lanterns on the water. They drifted apart slowly, their light fading as the current carried them into the dark. What began as a faint flicker of hope had turned once again into a haunting uncertainty. The AirPod, the hoodie, the theories, the scientific reports, all of it together formed a puzzle that refused to fit, and yet the story's pull remained. People continued to watch the recovered footage late at night, drawn by something they couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was the need to understand. Or perhaps it was that quiet, unnerving fascination with what happens when the wild reminds us just how small, how fragile, and how easily lost we truly are. Years had passed since Ryan and Mia vanished, yet their story refused to rest. What began as a tragedy had gradually transformed into something else, a living myth, a modern ghost story whispered between hikers and told on late-night radio shows. It was no longer just about 2 missing people. It had become about the place itself, the forest that seemed to breathe with its own dark memory. Locals began to call it the forest that keeps secrets. Some avoided it entirely, while others, drawn by morbid curiosity, came to see where the unspeakable had happened. They spoke in hushed tones about strange lights glimpsed between trees, voices carried by the wind, and the feeling that the forest was watching. This was the forest myth, born not from folklore of centuries past, but from digital-era unease, a ghost story for the Internet age. What cemented its place in popular imagination wasn't just the mystery, but the way it spread. As the years rolled on, the Internet kept the flame alive. Media and online frenzy followed in waves. Documentaries appeared on YouTube with titles like The Vanishing of Ryan and Mia, What Really Happened in the Woods. Independent filmmakers recreated the couple's final trip, some with genuine curiosity, others chasing views. Podcasters dissected every theory in haunting tones, layering eerie background sounds under their narration. And soon, the ghost hunters arrived, influencers live-streaming night vigils in the same woods, their torches flickering as they whispered into the dark, hoping for clicks and confirmation of the supernatural. The place had become both shrine and stage. At first, the authorities tried to discourage these expeditions, citing safety concerns and respect for the families, but the fascination was uncontrollable. Footage from visitors showed reflections in puddles, odd distortions in the air, and fleeting shapes that viewers online slowed down, zoomed in, and reinterpreted endlessly. Forums exploded with theories, screenshots, and time-stamped analyses. Some swore they saw faces forming in the dark, blurred outlines, staring from behind trees. Others claimed they heard faint cries or a rhythmic whisper that resembled chanting. Thus continued the endless debate. A digital séance played out across platforms, where no one agreed on what was real, and yet everyone wanted to believe. Even the GoPro footage resurfaced in endless remixes and enhanced versions. Audio engineers posted their own interpretations, adjusting frequencies to bring out hidden layers of sound. "Listen carefully," one video urged. "At the 20-second mark, that's not wind. That's someone saying leave." Another claimed the whispers were overlapping voices, too structured to be coincidence. There were even attempts to 3D map the reflections in the lens flare, producing grotesque, spectral faces that were almost but not quite human. Each new upload pulled in millions of views, and with each view, the line between fact and fiction thinned further. For some, the story became a metaphor about the dangers of obsession, the limits of reason, the way digital media can turn grief into spectacle. But for Ryan and Mia's families, the transformation of their children's story into a pop culture phenomenon was unbearable. Family struggles became a quiet, painful epilogue that rarely made headlines. Ryan's parents withdrew from public life, refusing interviews. Mia's sister spoke once in a televised segment, her voice trembling as she said, "They were real people. They had lives. This isn't entertainment." Yet even her plea was clipped, re-uploaded, remixed, and discussed in the very spaces that had turned the tragedy into legend. The pain of not knowing, of never having a body to bury, never being able to say goodbye, had long since curdled into a dull, enduring ache. For them, every new discovery online was another wound reopened, another wave of strangers debating whether their loved ones had been victims, fools, or phantoms. Meanwhile, the forest remained untouched, unchanged. Seasons passed over it, moss reclaimed the old campsite. The river, swollen after each rain, kept flowing as though it had forgotten. And yet, when dusk falls, and mist begins to coil through the undergrowth, people still say the air feels heavy there, as though something lingers. Some visitors claim they hear a faint echo, not of chanting now, but of laughter, the kind that might have belonged to two young travelers, unaware of what waited in the dark. Whether it's imagination, coincidence, or something beyond explanation, no one can say for certain. In the end, the story of Ryan and Mia transcended its origins. It became a mirror reflecting human fascination with the unknown, the collective need to turn fear into narrative, tragedy into myth. The forest doesn't speak, but the internet does, endlessly. And in that endless noise, the mystery lives on half-truth, half-legend. A reminder that some stories never die. They simply change shape, haunting the spaces between fact and faith, between silence and the whisper of leaves in the dark. The forest remains, silent, vast, and indifferent. Seasons come and go, the river still hums its low, steady song, and the wind still threads its way through the trees. Yet, beneath that calm, something lingers. The disappearance of Ryan and Mia was never solved, never given the comfort of explanation. Just two names carved into the collective memory of a place that refuses to tell its story. The endless mystery has become part of the landscape itself, as if the forest absorbed their voices and kept them for its own. Last summer, a new group of campers pitched their tents not far from where Ryan and Mia's site once stood. Sometime after midnight, one of them woke to the sound of a whisper, soft, almost playful, followed by the distinct pressure of a hand pressing against the thin fabric of the tent. When they scrambled outside, there was nothing but the faint rush of wind and the steady current of the river. They left before dawn. Perhaps the forest is only what we make of it, a mirror for our fears, our grief, our fascination with what hides in the dark. The cameras may stop recording, but some stories never really end. They echo quietly, in pixels, in whispers, in the human need to keep asking, what if? If this story has stirred something in you, that quiet mix of wonder and unease, subscribe for more true mysteries like this one. Because sometimes the truth isn't found in the light, but in the silence that follows.